Good evening, everyone. My name is Anderson. Ben and I have prepared this presentation on the singleton pattern. And as the name says, singleton means one, to be single. But what is this pattern and why we care? The singleton pattern, according to Geeks for Geeks, is a design pattern that restricts the instantiation of a class to one object. So it's a very simple pattern, and it means one thing to pay attention is that it restricts the instantiation of a class to one object. So we all know that software engineering is all about efficiency. And let's say, for example, if you have 1,000 classes and all of them need to have access to the same object, why not creating one class that will provide that one object to everyone and share it globally through to all those 1,000 classes? The singleton pattern has a lot of strengths, and one of them is really simple to use. You create one class, as Ben will explain later, but you create one class, and that class will be shared by everyone, and you only have one object of that class at a time. Also, it conserves execution resources. We all learn in CS 124, 165, 235 that creating and allocating resources may cost you a lot, and it may cost you efficiency. It sometimes might pose a security threat, and using the singleton pattern will actually conserve a lot of resources. Also, ensures a class has only one instance. Let's say, for example, you have a bank account with a balance in it, and you want all other classes and all the rest of the program to use it. You would have access to that one balance and it would be dealing with that one balance at all times. So you would be providing a global access point to it, and that would be a good example of why using the singleton pattern. Also, it encapsulates just-in-time initialization, meaning that the first class to use that object will initialize it as well. So this is easy. Will be encapsulating, and it would be initializing the object only when you need it. And yeah.
Hello, my name is Ben Burrell, and for my section of the presentation, I would like to transition to implementation examples. For the first example, we've got our singleton class has a private static member object that, of course, requires access through a public getter. However, something to notice is that the constructor function is in fact private, meaning that that also has to be accessed through a public function. This is what the getInstance function is for. If the object hasn't already been created, thereby if it is null, then the member data is instantiated to a new singleton object. Then that object is returned. This is a very basic singleton implementation. And it implements what Geeks for Geeks refers to as lazy instantiation, where the singleton object is not created or instantiated until getInstance is called, which, as you'll notice, is public and static. So it doesn't have to wait until a singleton class object is declared in order for it to be able to be called. Now, the one downside to this, unique downside to this particular implementation is that it is not thread safe. Because of how this check works, if multiple threads running simultaneously each called their own singleton object, then in theory, they would each create their own singleton object, thereby creating errors whenever that was attempted to reference again in a different thread. However, although we said that singletons are not inherently thread safe, it is possible to make it thread safe through use of the synchronized keyword. And this particular implementation prevents that problem of multiple threads by using a synchronized, so that each thread will only create all the threads will only create one singleton object. Now, naturally, this code will only ever need to be run once. After that, it'll just skip this whole conditional and go straight to the return statement. So as you can see, this bypasses the thread-safe downfall of typical singleton classes, and instead makes it so that we really only have to deal with the other shortcomings of the singleton class. That then is the end of what we really prepared for informative purposes. However, although this is the end of the proper sort of the presentation, I would like to go over a couple of the questions that will be added for the singleton section of the quiz. As you can see, we've got 3 questions that we've added. The first one is a true or false question. Asks whether or not the singleton design pattern should be considered when global access is not otherwise provided. Because this is one of the purposes of the singleton design pattern, as we read on the first source that we cited, one of the benefits, and in fact the main use for this, is to provide global access where it's not otherwise provided to the information. And the second question, disadvantages of the singleton pattern. So we have 4 different choices. And if you reference our strengths and shortcomings page, you can see that simple to use, that should never be a shortcoming. Conservation of execution resources, also not really a shortcoming in any situation. Provides a global point of access to it, and only one instance can be declared. Now, if we're looking at it from a security standpoint, this might be a disadvantage. But as we saw when we were looking at thread-safe options, the ability to only declare one instance is something that makes this a little bit more clunky to use. So that's what we will consider a disadvantage. Then as for the third question, you select all that applies. Which of the following are necessary parts of writing a singleton class? We have a private constructor method, a public static getInstance method to call the constructor. The name of the class must be singleton, and getInstance only calls constructor when member data is null. So we look at both of the examples we had here, and they both have a private constructor. They have a public quote-unquote getInstance function, and neither of them will execute any extra code if the member data object is not null. Now they're both named singleton, but that's only for the purpose of the examples. So of course, this would be the only options that you wouldn't need to, that you would be not checking on this question. So with that, thank you for watching, and hopefully you do well on the quiz.